Hello and welcome to the Parent Survival Kit podcast, from surviving to thriving in your household. My name is Gene Schwalen. Next to me, as always, my beautiful bride, Dr. Sonia Schwalen, pediatric psychologist expert and nationally certified school psychologist. And today we're going to talk about the thing that parents are most excited about coming up here in August, or are we? Back to school.
Back to school.
So should we take it back to the future?
I don't know what that means.
Well, I mean, we're talking about last year with COVID and whatnot. We were all questioning, do we go back to school? Do we do remote learning? Do we get involved in some type of co-ops or, homeschooling? I mean, there's been so many questions that are still lingering from last year. That what do we do with getting back to school this year? Do we finally go ahead and take the plunge? I know a lot of parents did send their kids back eventually last year at some point in time, but there's still a lot of parents that have that question that did not. And then there's also the question of what does back to school look like this year with the new Delta, strand that's out. Do we do masks? Do we not do masks? Kids who have not been back in school, what is it going to be like to actually go back to school and be in that social, arena again? There's a lot of things that we have to worry about, not to mention all the regular things parents need to worry about: schedule, structure, screen time, as we prepare for our kids who have been on summer break to actually get back into school. And then with that being said, those who actually have been on remote learning, it may be really tough to get back to a certain schedule that they haven't been on, for over a year and a half now. So,
back to school, back to the future. I say back to the basics, right?
There
so
you
we
go.
always talk
Back
about
to the
on
basics.
this podcast. So back to the basics. I mean, you mentioned, we're coming off a summer vacation and we're preparing for the school year ahead. And so if we go back to the basics, every family is used to that, right? Now, obviously, it's much more complicated this year because of everything else that we just talked about with how the pandemic just changed everything, right? And we're in unprecedented times. And so there are a lot of questions. But I always say just let's start with the basics. That's like a really great place to start so that we don't get so overwhelmed and we can take it one step at a time.
Sounds good. So getting back to the basics, let's just start with getting back to the basics, just as what it looks like for parents to really help their kids be most successful, regardless of what setting they're going to be in.
Okay. So regardless of what setting they're going to be in, we always want to talk to parents about the importance of a routine, schedules, right? Normal meal times, regular family time, and like you mentioned, limited or some clear boundaries around screen time. I always throw in there like outside time, chore time, free time, things like that also. Because when I'm helping in sessions, right, if I'm in a family therapy session, for example, or a parent session, and I'm helping parents kind of come up with how do I even build a schedule? I want them to think about Monday through Friday and then also Saturday and Sunday. And Saturday and Sunday are usually looser schedules on the weekends, right? They're not as structured, and that's good and healthy to kind of have both. But I also want them to think about a loose schedule, like some structure on the weekends, because you don't want kids to just have like a free-for-all completely and be left to run amok.
Yeah.
So Monday through Friday, think about the time they need to wake up in order to have enough time to leisurely have breakfast, get ready, and get out the door in time. I like to say leisurely because I want parents to understand that we need to protect that space for our kids in the morning. It's not usually recommended to set your kid up to have to rush out the door or to have so much pressure and stress in the morning. You want them to have time to really ease into their morning.
Or to feel the pressure and stress from the parent because they're stressing out because they've got to get out the house and they're chasing their tails and going 100 miles an hour.
Exactly. And so because you said that, you need to also think backwards a little bit into, well, if they need to wake up at this time in order to have at least 45 minutes to an hour before they even have to leave the house, what time do they actually have to go to bed at night, right?
Well, and let's talk about this really quick because we did a podcast not too long ago about the morning routine and whatnot for parents to really help them be most successful. So let's kind of back into that morning routine a little bit because I think that's going to be really, really key. In the morning, we know that we all have to eat. The first meal of the day, breakfast, is the most important meal of the day, and it sets us up for success. When we wake up and we're having to rush around and whatnot, we're setting ourselves up for a very bad day from the start. So getting up early enough as parents, what time do we need as parents for ourselves to get up to do the things we want to do and need to do for our kids to be prepared so that when they are awake, we can help them be as successful as they need to be. So what are the routines or things that we want to put in place for ourselves? How much time do we need for that? That means we need to wake up that much earlier than the scheduled time for our kids. And when we really look at the time that our kids need to wake up, what is it going to require for them? Do they take baths in the evening or in the mornings? How much time do they need to eat breakfast to get their school bag together? Do they do that at night before they actually go to bed? So all these things that we should question as parents, if we can actually get some type of structure together, that can definitely help us start that morning off on the right step.
Right. And so when we take our kids back to the basics and we're setting up morning routines, afternoon routines, and bedtime routines, we also absolutely have to think about our routine and how that works itself out so that we still have enough time for us and the routine that we're putting our kids in. So what you said is, how early do we have to wake up to get through our morning routine to be fully prepared and ready for when the kids actually do wake up so we can be present for our children and help them successfully navigate their morning routine. Now, I talk to families all the time, and a very good example of one mom who's been struggling with morning routine is, dad, he works and mom's a stay-at-home. And so dad's really busy with office and he's working from home right now because of COVID. And he's an executive high up in a company. So he's very busy all the time.
Lots of demands.
Mm-hmm, lots of demands. And so, this family in particular has 4 children. And mom is running the household, managing the children, getting them to their appointments, to school, to practice, all that good stuff, putting dinner on the table, very busy, right? And so dad has made it well known to the whole family that sleep is really important to him. He can't really function well if he doesn't get at least 8 hours. So, like clockwork, he gets to go to bed at a certain time, wake up at a certain time, and the family respects that. That's just how their family operates, and that's an agreement that they've come to. Well, when I talk to mom about her routines with the children so that she can also get some sleep and have time for herself, what's ending up happening is that she's not pushing bedtime as much as she probably should be. And so the kids are going to bed later and later, and they're not getting enough sleep. And then when the youngest one wakes up, because he wakes up the earliest, she maybe sometimes finds herself on the couch still dressed from the day before, and now it's morning because the little one is wailing. Sometimes she's in her bed fully clothed and hasn't showered yet from the night before because she's exhausted. And then what happens is, because she's trying so hard just to get any sleep that she can get at this point, when the little one wakes up, she's woken up by that. So now her day starts with someone needing her emotionally, crying for her, to the point where she's literally said, I get out of bed, I stumble out of my room, and I have to go soothe the crying baby, and I don't even have time to pee, right? And she's still in clothes from the day before.
My question is, where's the morning coffee at in this routine, right?
Not there. She's lucky if she even gets to make it.
So I guess the crying baby is the morning coffee, right?
Exactly. And so that, I give that example because that is so real. That's such a real life example. And that's why we always talk about, don't expect overnight changes, because that's not fair of you and your family and all the people who have to adjust just so you can get some sleep. But let's start with one thing at a time. Let's go back to the basics. What is one thing that you can do every day starting right now until it becomes routine? And then you build on the next thing until that becomes routine. And that's exactly what we recommend, honestly, for the summertime. Summertime is almost over. We want to start changing one thing at a time now for our kids and our family so that it's not a complete overhaul, overnight for the night before school. So bedtimes, for example, let's start moving those earlier now so kids have 2 to 3 weeks of practice with that. And then maybe next week we start with holding them accountable to showering every night before bed. And then after that, it's maybe getting their chores done every night before shower, or whatever it may look like.
So let's talk about bedtimes, since that's a big topic, because when bedtimes are not exercised properly, then parents obviously are not getting the sleep they need. They can't unwind. They can't have time for themselves. And we're waking up in the clothes we wore the next day, and that's not cool, right? That really stings, you know what I'm saying? No pun intended. So bedtimes, I know one thing that parents always ask, and I'm included in this, what is an appropriate bedtime? So let's talk about different age groups. Can you just give us an idea? I know it varies by, by kid and by household too, but what's just a kind of a good general basis for bedtimes?
I mean, you want to make sure that your child is getting minimum 8 hours of sleep a night, but usually they need more than that, okay? And your kid will tell you how much they need based on how much they're getting every night.
I can't tell you how many times, and in fact, I think, even just visiting with your family this past weekend, your sister and her husband talk about how their kids don't need as much sleep, and I've heard that from a lot of people, and not because
it's not that they don't need as much sleep, because what's happening is those kids are going to bed later, and so they're waking up later, so their day starts later, so they do need that sleep, and the kids get it. That's what I mean. Your kids will tell you how much sleep they need based on the average amount of hours they're getting every night. If you let your kids sleep until the point that they wake up naturally for just a week straight, you'll get to understand how many hours they need every night.
Okay.
So usually with my sister's kids, for example, they don't go to bed till about 8:30, 9 o'clock, but they're also not waking up the next morning until 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And that's pretty typical. Toddlers usually take about 12 to 13 hours of sleep a night. Ours do it too, but ours go to bed earlier, right? Ours go to bed around 6:30 at night, and they wake up the next morning between 6 and 7:30 a.m. So it's the same time frame that they're sleeping. It's just different times of the day that it's happening. So when people ask me what is a good bedtime for my child, I say put them to bed early enough so that they have enough time to get all 12 hours of sleep that they need, or all 10 hours of sleep that they might need, or 8 hours. That's how you figure that out.
Okay, and then how do we, so we want to calculate bedtime, 8 to 10 hours, 12 hours, depending on the age of the kid.
You can do that, or you can even do what I do. I mean, the reason our kids go to bed so early is because mama needs her alone time at night. I've been at work all day. I've been with clients all day. I've been taking care of people all day. And then I come home and take care of the kids also. And I just need a couple hours to myself at night after they go to bed so I can also wind down. So I've trained them to go to bed at 6:30, knowing that they're going to be awake at 6:30 the next morning. And that's fine because I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. So I still get a couple hours in the morning to myself. So, that very much plays into my needs as a parent as well.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So what I'm trying to get at is, so let's talk about how many hours of sleep they actually need. How much time do we need to actually feed them in the mornings? I can tell you that I know lots of parents and lots of kids who don't get a proper breakfast in the mornings. They're eating what is it called? Those biscuit things in the mornings on the way to school, and Velvetas and whatnot. I mean, kids just really aren't getting
some even just drink a cup of milk and that's it,
or a protein shake or something like that, and they're not getting a proper meal. So really planning that out is also very, very important.
It's important, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of times kids will say, I'm just not hungry in the morning, or I feel kind of sick or nauseous, and that's a common complaint. And one of the things that we don't understand in kids is that they feel a lot of their feelings in their body. And so they may just be feeling hungry and not recognize that as hunger because it feels like being nauseous. And so if we just get them to eat on a schedule, their body will start to get used to being fed at certain times. Their metabolism will start working and actually send them hunger cues, more likely than not, around the same time every day. But in order to get there, you have to train your kid to eat at those times. So I understand you're not feeling well, right? So take small bites, eat slow, but it's still time to eat, and that's what we're going to do right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and kids also can be anxious about the school day or what's going on and what's coming up, and even how their parents are acting based on them being under pressure and stress. So there's a lot of things that can go into those feelings that kids may be having in their stomach. All right, so you mentioned a client that has 4 kids and not getting enough sleep herself. She can't be the best mom. She can be probably not the best wife either because of all the things she's having to face. So when you have multiple kids and you're the one responsible for bedtime, what are some things we can do as parents to really kind of help facilitate that bedtime together? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, their kids are going to be resistant to going into bed. Our kids, no matter how structured they are, they're always resistant to going to bed. Once they go to bed, they're fine. Once we actually get into the bedroom and start doing story time, they're fine. It's just having to get through that little, 5-minute, 10-minute episode to get them to go to bed and whatnot. But what can we do as parents with multiple kids? I mean, can we do like joint book time, story time?
Absolutely. Try to figure out ways to save some time, right? So one of my biggest recommendations, and I think this really catches parents off guard a lot because I see their reaction when I give the recommendation. But I always say, do not lay down in bed with your child. Don't do it, because then it becomes a habit. They become completely dependent on it. And when your child wakes up in the middle of the night and every time you walk them back to their bed, you lay down with them, you're just rewarding the fact that they keep coming and getting you in the middle of the night. Why wouldn't they want to cuddle all night if they know that's what the result is going to be? And so one of my recommendations is, even if you've been doing that for years, get a chair that's really cozy and put it in their room. And always do bedtime and reading time in a chair. Your child can sit in your lap. They can cuddle with you. And if you have more than one child, take them to the couch in the living room and say, it's bedtime. We're going to read stories. Each one of you gets to pick a book. Make sure the books are short. And even if you have to read 3 or 4 books, you can still finish reading everyone's book. Everyone gets to sit with you on the couch. They get to cuddle you. You get to hold them. You get to kiss them. You get to sing to them. You get to do all those lovely things. But do not lay down with your child until they fall asleep. It's a trap that I know a lot of parents are in. I talk to families about it all the time. And then what ends up happening is they're exhausted, right? They've had a very long day. They fall asleep in that bed with their child. The other children might be calling for you. Now you're rotating whose bed you're laying in. It's a lot, and parents aren't trapped in that cycle. So that's number one. Even if you've been doing that, I say that it's totally okay at any time to revert to a chair or a common area where you're going to start bedtime routine. And then when it's time for every child to actually go to their own bed to fall asleep, I always recommend that you put them down while they're still awake. This is basic baby training, right? Like moms and dads, remember when you had your infant and you had all those books that you were reading about how to get your kid to sleep through the night? Lay them down while they're still awake. Do what you're going to do. Pray over them. Tell them good night. Tell them you'll see them in the morning. And then leave the room. And so for toddlers also, I usually recommend putting some kind of lock or device on the door so that they can't just open the door and leave in the middle of the night and come get you. They start to get really used to the association of, when I'm in my bed, I lay in my bed, I stay in my room until the door is closed, and when one of my parents comes to open it, that's the only time I can come out. That's what I recommend usually. And then the children, over time, the more and more they become used to it, they just get used to drifting off and falling asleep on their own. Falling asleep on your own is a life skill. It's a skill we as parents have to teach our kids. It's also, what I explain to parents, is an act of faith. Because at night, especially when kids are younger, they have fears of the dark or of monsters or nightmares or all the normal things that come up. And so we have to teach our children how to calm themselves, self-soothe, and be able to fall asleep without us laying right next to them.
Yeah, that's a good point for a lot of our parents, too, because I know a lot of our parents don't fall asleep on their own either. There's a screen, there's a TV on, there's something that's going on, and they fall asleep to the TV. They have the timers on there. I mean, that's the most genius thing for TVs, right? I remember when I got mine years and years and years ago, first when I was a kid in my grade school years, and there was a timer on it. So I could watch TV, set the timer, it'd turn off, and man, that was so cool. But as you know, there's been lots of research that show how bad it is for anyone to fall asleep to a TV. Mm-hmm. So one thing that we've done that I've never slept with until probably about 3 years ago is a sound machine. And it works so beautifully. Just some white noise in the bedrooms for the kids, for the parents, and it really helps getting people calm to go to sleep on their own.
Absolutely. And, even if your child is 5, 6, 7 years old, it's also okay if you're putting like a lock on their door or doorknob blocker so they can't turn their own doorknob, to just keep a baby monitor in their room. So when they do need you, they can call you and you wake up, you just go find out what they need. But they always associate them calling you when they need you rather than them opening the door, coming to find you and waking you up on their terms in the middle of the night. It's the other way around.
Yeah, and so what are some strategies for older kids who may have a problem still going to sleep on their own or going to sleep to a TV, which a lot of kids do? What are some tips that parents can utilize that they can actually utilize for their kids to help them go to sleep without the need of a TV or a screen or something?
I mean, those are sleep hygiene questions, right? And so just basic sleep hygiene is turning down screens 30 minutes before bedtime so that we can allow melatonin to just naturally start developing in our brain and start feeling sleepy. We always recommend like very quiet, peaceful types of routines. So maybe reading a book or taking a warm shower, maybe listening to some soft music before bed. It's also okay if kids want to fall asleep to like some soft classical music or a sound machine, but not with their cell phone in their bed or the TV on. And if that's something that kids are struggling with, you start with one thing at a time. So you might start with getting your child used to turning everything off 30 minutes before bedtime and starting to read a book. Or that's a really good time. I'm just going to put this out there for you as a parent to go hang out with your kid. A lot of times what happens with older kids, I see it all the time, is, once a kid turns 8 or 9 years old, parents are like, yes, they can finally put themselves to bed. And even that 16, 17, 18-year-old doesn't necessarily want to always go put themselves to bed. They actually like it, even if they don't say they do, when you still go put them to bed. So, hey, go get ready for bed. I'll come check on you in a few minutes. And then you actually go up there to their room and you talk with them, you pray with them, you let them know that you love them and you're proud of them, and then tuck them in. They're still your baby, even though it's, 17 years later. They like that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Our 18-year-old, even to this day, he'll still come in when I'm putting our 8-year-old to bed, and he'll come in and listen to a story, even though it's about a princess and some magical kingdom and whatnot. But he'll come in and listen and lay down, and we'll pray. We'll say a couple funny jokes, and then he'll go off to his room. He will put himself to bed because he doesn't want daddy to put him to bed. He's too big for that. But he does come in, and a lot of times he comes in on his own. He kind of turns the corner and comes in and just hangs out. So, all right. So we've got bedtime, we've got morning time routines, other routine structure that we need to get that back to school habits in motion.
Meal times, even breakfast. I say that you don't want to do it in the car as often as possible. You don't want to be on the rush. You don't want to just accept that they drank a cup of milk and that's it. You want them to have at least 20 to 30 minutes of breakfast time. And if 30 minutes is too long, it's too long. Then shoot for 20 minutes. But you want that meal, just like we want all meals, to be at a table, not in front of a TV, where they don't feel pressure. And so no tablets, no TVs, just time to sit and enjoy their breakfast and maybe talk to you if you're running around packing things to leave for the day, or just relax. Some kids like to read newspaper. They do. I've heard. I still meet kids that do that, or read a book at breakfast. And some kids don't mind just sitting there and eating.
Yeah, well, one thing we found with our kids is that morning time routine at the breakfast table is really important for them. They really enjoy that time they have with us before the day starts. And if you think about it, how much time do you have with your kids each and every day? Usually it's going to be in the morning time and it's going to be in the evening. So breakfast and dinner, those are really two key times to really have, even if it's 20 minutes, just sitting down with your kids, taking a break, and giving them that special time that they need so that they just feel more connected. And that just helps out, I see, in so many ways later on in the day. Like when you do get home, they're not as needy because they've had some time with you already that day. And then dinner time is coming up, so.
No, absolutely. They understand the schedule of when family time is, so the behaviors go down. So you see a lot less, maladaptive ways or unhelpful ways of trying to get your attention, because they are used to getting your attention throughout the day.
Absolutely. All right. Any other things we can talk about? You can give us some tips on for back to school routine, structure, and things we need to be focused on as a parent.
I think that, as we get closer to the school year starting, we're going to get more and more information about what different school districts are doing and what every, community's viewpoint on going back to school with COVID, with masks, without masks, virtual, in person. I think that discussion is going to ramp up here.
Vaccinated, not vaccinated.
Yes, it's going to ramp up here again, and we just need to be prepared for that. I think we're kind of, veterans at this. Like, it's old hat to have the anxiety about the pandemic, which is so sad that I even said that, but it's just the truth that we live in now. And so hopefully it's not as anxiety provoking this year around. I hope that parents out there are trusting themselves more. They kind of understand what the options are, and they feel empowered to make whatever decision is best for their family.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I can, and suggest to parents too. I mean, there's so much going on in the news right now. The news has kind of died down. There's not been these huge stories here over the last few months, with CDC guidelines changing and all these things, with COVID kind of dwindling away, right? But now all of a sudden we have the Delta strand that's increasing, and there's a lot more cases being reported. Cases are going up in each state, which can be a concern. I'm not saying don't be concerned about it. But look to government regulations, look to what's being recommended, look to the school districts, really do research on what's going on in your area versus reading the news or listening to the news, because the news is going to always find something to talk about, and it's going to be negative because there's no other way to get you to listen to it unless it's negative, right? We're not listening to positive news all day, every day. That would be great.
That's right. So let's end on a positive note then.
Sounds good. So, we thank you for joining the Parents of Advocate podcast today. Back to school is going to be here before you know it. Get prepared. And if you have any questions, please send some comments below. We look forward to hearing from you, and we will see you next week.